What's going on, everybody? It's EricRayweather back here with more Madden 18 news for you guys. Now, in a couple of past videos, we've already covered the specific new game modes. We've covered some of the gameplay fixes and stuff like that. So today, a big part of the video is going to be for the CFM and franchise guys. We're also going to have a couple of gameplay presentation things to talk about and speak on the Frostbite engine just a little bit. Now, I'm pulling most of this content from a new Rex Dixon interview that hit YouTube. I'm not sure of the guy's channel. I will look it up and I will link it in the description below after I finish recording this video. But I watched it a couple hours ago and I took some notes, and I said, that I was gonna, like I said, anytime any new information comes out, I'm gonna bring it to you guys, just in case you haven't heard about it yet. So. Today's interview was actually that I watched was very good. He touched on, like I said, a lot of CFM and franchise stuff, which is, there's a really, a big majority of the Madden community are CFM and franchise type guys. And they were wondering, like, has anything been done to CFM? Has anything been done to franchise mode this year? That's what they wanted to hear about the most. And I'm going to save that for later on in the video because that's what I have the bulk to kind of talk about. So I want to talk about the other things first. So first off, he spoke briefly on the Frostbite engine and what that's going to do for the game, kind of from a looks, like a visual standpoint and from a gameplay standpoint. So he said the most notable difference with Frostbite engine, in his opinion, is the lighting in the game. The lighting looks a lot more real and just fantastic. The light shining off the helmets, the stadiums at night. And just little things like that. So he said lighting is a very, very good looking thing about the game this year because of the Frostbite engine. He said that things like animations, particularly player animations in their faces, the faces obviously are going to look more realistic year in and year out. Anytime they change engines, the graphics get better. But he said specifically the facial animations, the way they react in the game, is going to be a big thing this year that has been taken up to the next level. So that's one thing the Frostbite engine has done as well. And one last thing on the Frostbite engine, he said from a gameplay standpoint, the game is just smoother, and that's always one of the biggest things that they try to do is make the game smoother every year. And when you jump to a new engine, you usually can get you make a bigger leap in terms of how smooth the game moves. And he said particularly in the run game, when you're running the ball, running through the tackles, it just feels better than ever before. It feels like you have more control over your guy, which is a huge thing in the game. Some of these past few years, at times it feels like you have control, but you don't have the amount of control that you want. Sometimes you're getting pulled in one direction or the other. He said this year, the control is, you have more control, it's smoother, and you're hitting the holes better. And if you have good stick skill, it's going to be rewarded more so than ever because of this Frostbite engine. So that's basically all they talked about when it came to the Frostbite engine. Now going to gameplay presentation, something a lot of people are always asking about every year. We always want gameplay to improve. We always want the modes to improve, the features to improve, but presentation is something a lot of people are worried about, and rightfully so, because you want a game that looks cool, that's always adding those little extra things that you just like to look at when you're playing the game. So a few things that they touched on are sideline interactions are finally in the game, and he even made a mention to like NFL 2K doing this a decade ago when they had the game, and a lot of people always complaining like, oh, NFL 2K was able to do this years ago, why hasn't EA done it yet? And certain things just slip through the cracks and they just don't get around to for some reason. But he said they finally have sideline interactions. What that means is if you're running the ball, for instance, and you run out of bounds, you can bump into the players, you fall on the ground, the players will help you up and push you back onto the field. They may high-five you on the sideline, pat you on the back, things like that. So you're finally going to get those sideline interactions and not just have that robotic just the sideline does nothing. They just stand there every play and just kind of sway back and forth. Not this year. We're going to actually see some interactions from those guys. Running out of the tunnel is, there's going to be a lot of good camera work in terms of like pre-game running out of the tunnel, getting hyped up. Touchdown celebrations are back in the game because they're also back in the NFL this year. And he said that you're going to see more celebrations than you had in years past. He said, for instance, if you were to score a touchdown and there's a teammate next to you, it's going to trigger like a group animation, or it might just be 2 or 3 people. They're going to, do a touchdown celebration together. Whereas if you're kind of just all by yourself, you'll just do your own celebration. And he also did mention that going forward, probably won't be updated this year, but in future years, they're going to start having player-specific animations or touchdown celebrations that are going to be, a big group of them in the game. And he said that they already had programmed a lot of them, but they just weren't able to get it into the game, at least not for release. Now, that might not happen until next year, but he said that's something to look out for, as well as player-specific celebrations will be going forward at some point. Things like fireworks and cannons going off when you score touchdowns and things like that are back in the game, and they're going to be more. You're going to see that happen more often. And he said a big thing is of the groundwork that they put into the game this year. Right out the gate, it might not. A lot of these things might not be as big as they want it to be, but they have the ability to update these animations. So they said that, for instance, now that the NFL has allowed touchdowns to happen again, they said they're going to be watching the NFL closely, and when they do the first title update, for instance, if certain celebrations that they see in the NFL this year see how players are using the ball as a prop, since that's allowed now, and seeing how teams do touchdown celebrations, they'll be able to put these new animations into the game, just like they updated the commentary this year throughout Madden 17. Every few weeks they would update the commentary team to say things that made it like in real time. So if like Tony Romo got hurt last week, when they updated the commentary, they would be like, oh, Tony Romo got hurt this past week. Now Dak Prescott's in, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. It's going to be the same way with things like animations now. They'll be able to update celebrations and things like that. So that's cool. Having things that can be updated throughout the year is a big part of online gaming now. Now, finally, it's time to get to the CFM and franchise, what I'm sure most people clicked on the video to see. Now, first off and foremost, I would like to start with this because he said this in his interview, and it's definitely a good point to make. He said that, a lot of people feel like CFM and franchise is always left on the back burner, and all EA cares about is MUT because MUT brings in so much money and things like that. And he said it's just not true, because at the end of the day, the 65% of the community that plays Madden, 65% play franchise in some shape, form, or fashion. Maybe they're not all hardcore franchise players, but they play franchise. So he said to leave franchise guys on the back burner and to say that they don't care about them would just be crazy to say that, because that is the biggest majority of your audience, of the people that pay money to buy this game every year. So to not keep those guys satisfied, he said, would be a huge mistake. That would be something that would, take the game backwards. That would cripple, EA if they just did not want to update and help improve franchise, because guys could just keep playing Madden 15 and just updating you could download new rosters. You wouldn't need to buy the new game every year. You could buy it every few years. So they say it's crucial for them to update this every year. So I wanted to start with that. Now, a couple big things you're going to see this year in franchise mode, and this is going to be, I'm sure this is going to happen, in other modes as well, but it's going to be bigger in franchise mode. It's going to be off-ball injuries. So that means your offensive lineman might get hurt away from the ball when he's blocking, or a wide receiver running down the sideline away from the play could pull his hamstring or something like that, and he could be out a few games. Now, this is something you don't want to see happen if you're actually playing, but those hardcore franchise and sim guys, that's real life right there. That happens. So those are the little things they like to see implemented into the game, and I think it's a good addition because it happens in real life, so it should happen in the franchise mode and in CFM, and then you have to plan accordingly around it. Another big thing in CFM this year, they said, is they tuned the regression. So like some of the older players, when you're playing a few years or a couple years into your franchise, you've got guys regressing really quickly. Even guys, you have guys like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers that are some of the best, and these kind of quarterbacks don't in real life, they don't regress just because they're getting older. They might regress a little bit, but they don't regress drastically because they're so great. But in Madden in the franchise mode, sometimes these guys regress a little bit too much because they're getting older. So they tuned that down and said the regression for those really good players won't be as extreme as it has been in years past. So I'm sure that's going to please a lot of people right there. Defensive adjustments, I did touch on this on the previous video, but just to touch on it again because this is a big part of CFM and franchise mode, you can now, set your defensive assignments. You can have your best cornerback always cover the best wide receiver, and so on and so forth. You can also do it by depth chart. So say you don't want to go by rating and you might want to go by height, and you want your tallest cornerback to always to cover the tallest wide receiver. You can go to your depth chart in franchise mode and say, okay, well, there's 6'5" wide receivers, number 2 on the depth chart, so I'm going to put my tallest cornerback at number 2 on the depth chart, so on and so forth. And then you have the option to say, do defensive matchups by the depth chart and things like that. It's going to be not only for the secondary but for the defensive line and stuff like that, in terms of how do you want them to pass rush, do you want them to be more aggressive or be more focused on stopping the run, and all kind of things like that. So that's going to be a great improvement that's been needed back in the game for a long time. They got something now that's also called Play Now Live. I'm not a big franchise mode player, so I don't believe this was in the game previously. I know that this was in 2K, the basketball game, which basically means you can kind of pick up and start your franchise from, if it's week 10 in the NFL season and you haven't played franchise mode yet, you can pick up from week 10 and there'll be an option to play live, which means, let's say I want to play as the Patriots and it's week 10 and the Patriots are 9-1. Tom Brady's hurt and he's out for the year. Let's say I can go in and say, hey, I want to start my season now live, so I can be the Patriots. They'll already be 9-1. Tom Brady will be injured. Everything that has happened in the regular season so far, you can pick up from that point and start your franchise there, and then play those few weeks out, go to the playoffs or whatever the case, and then, well, once that's over, you go into the off season and start the following year. So that's another big addition. 2K has had it, so now Madden is going to have it as well. And he said that it's important for CFM and franchise to have these live things. And he said that they're going forward. It might not happen this year, but they put the groundwork in. They have the infrastructure to update franchise and CFM the same way they update MUT. Because going back to what people were saying, that they only focus on MUT, MUT gets all the promos and stuff like that, and he said those type of things are going to start happening for franchise and CFM as well. They're going to have their own promos, they're going to have their own live content. He said that's crucial for all game modes to have that, because that's where gaming is going now. You don't want to just play something that can't be updated throughout the year. And he said, the MUT guys have their things that they get updated with throughout the year, but he also wants franchise and CFM going forward to have those things as well, so that they're not left out. But he did say that as far as the updating and the live content, it might not be too big this year because they just couldn't get to everything, but they put the infrastructure in place to make sure that going forward that can be a big focus for the next years to come. So that's something that I'm sure a lot of CFM guys are going to be happy about, and that might even be something that brings me into CFM if they can turn it into something like that that's constantly having a lot of live update content. That's something I'm going to probably look forward into playing myself. Now, pretty much that's it for the interview. That's about the bulk of the important updates. Like I said, I'll link that video below if you want to watch the whole thing. It's about a 20 to 25-minute video, but it's a really good video. He does touch on all these things and a couple of little extra things, so just wanted to bring the info to you guys. Like I said, I would be doing throughout the year. Want to make sure you guys are up to date. So if you enjoyed this video, just as always, like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for all the latest Madden 18 news and Madden 17 tips, and I will see you guys next time.